Sounds True presents The Tree of Life, Meditation, Prayers, and Practices of Mystical Judaism with Rabbi David Zeller. Rabbi David Zeller, of blessed memory, was a pioneer in Jewish spirituality and was an internationally known teacher, counselor, and singer. Rabbi Zeller was a student of the late Rabbi Shlomo Carlebach for 28 years and is the author of The Soul of the Story, Meetings with Remarkable People, and has recorded several albums of his music. And now The Tree of Life, Session 1, The Call to Jewish Mysticism, with Rabbi David Zeller.
Shalom, 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 Shalom. Welcome to the Tree of Life. This will be a journey of sorts through various teachings from Judaism and Jewish mysticism, looking at the experiential path to knowing God, to being one with God, the path of the mystic who seeks to go beyond just an identity as a Jew to bring his or her relationship to the deepest of levels. What is the path of a mystic? What makes any of us turn to mysticism? What's the wake-up call that says, I need to have more? There must be more. I think we've all heard the call at one time or another. Question is, do we answer it? Do we believe it's possible? Do we long for it enough? My own journey into Judaism and into Jewish mysticism has also been a pretty long and interesting one. I'd like to share a little bit about me so you understand the experiences and the background and the maps that I come from as I put the pieces together in my life that I hope will help you in your own mystical journey. I was raised in a Jungian family. My father, of blessed memory, was a Jungian psychologist. All our family friends were Jungians. And all I heard them talking about was Jung and dreams and their clients. Jung's picture was in every room of our house. His books were everywhere. In terms of Judaism, we were at best Reform. I don't think we could even call ourselves that. We really didn't attend any services. I didn't know a whole lot of what it was really about. I had my Jewish identity. I knew my parents came from Germany. My father had been in the Holocaust, had been very briefly in concentration camp. But the Judaism that I was learning at Passover and at Hanukkah, the two main holidays that we really touched on, was a Jungian interpretation. And for us, the Passover Seder and the story of coming out of Egypt was the story of the individual breaking free from the slavery of their ego personality and wandering in the wilderness in the process of individuation to receive the guidance from the experience of revelation of Torah to make it into the promised land, the goal of individuation. And I thought it was very nice, made good sense, worked well for Jungians. I had no idea that this had any reality in Judaism until many, many years later when I began to encounter my first mystical teachers in Judaism. So my start was a Jungian one, a world of dreams and realities beyond just our simple waking one, as a world of graphology, astrology, palm reading, all kinds of tools to say there is so much more beyond the individual, worlds beyond. So in that sense, I think I was kind of lucky, fortunate to have that orientation as I grew up. I met Jung when I was about 10 years old. My family was in Switzerland for a year, and I had written him how much I wanted to meet the great man. And it was arranged that he was coming to a celebration at the Jungian Institute, and I was waiting out in front for him, and he came out of the car, and I'd only known him in pictures, and here he was, this big Swiss peasant. And he said, "Well, you must be Max Zeller's son." And I looked up, I said, "Oh, I'm so glad to meet you. I've heard so much about you." And he opens his arms wide and takes a step back and says, "Well, what do you think?" So this was one of my first meetings with remarkable people. And my contact with many, many of the Jungians, well-known, less well-known, that sort of kept me on my toes in my early journey. It wasn't until I was in my early 20s, in the mid-60s, that I met Rabbi Shlomo Carlebach. I was going to a Berkeley folk festival. I was very deep into American folk music. I was not looking for anything Jewish. And here was this rabbi singing in the folk festival, and out of curiosity and maybe even a little disgust, I don't know, but I went to his workshop the next day. And he said, "What's the use of talking about Jewish folk music? Let's just sing." And he started singing. And he got us all up dancing. And we danced around in circles of this workshop for 2 hours, 2.5 hours. And it just blew me away. He wasn't talking. It wasn't words. It was singing from the heart that just moved all of us. I met him in the street the next day. I said, "You know, I had the most incredible experience in your workshop, and it was really so wonderful." He said, "Oh, that's great." He says, "Come tomorrow morning to my hotel." I said, "Wow," he's invited me to his hotel, and I'm just so excited and thrilled, and I can't wait. And the next morning, I'm up and early, and I'm rushing over to the hotel. He wants to see me. And there's 80 other people who he's also invited to be with him. And I began to understand this was a man who loved everybody and invited everybody and took everybody in and meant it for every single person individually. It was a new experience to encounter that kind of joy, that kind of love, that kind of acceptance. He had a concert that night. I think we danced for more than 8 hours. And when the concert was over, they were already broadcasting the concert over public radio. And we just turned on radios in cars and radios that people had, and we just kept on dancing for hours into the middle of the night. Again, no words were spoken. He wasn't talking about, he wasn't telling us what we ought to do, what it means to be Jewish. In fact, half the people in the group weren't Jewish. He just drew people to him because of his love and because of his joy and because of the instant access. I don't know if instant, you had to dance a long time, but it was so pure and it was so joyous. And the atmosphere around him was just really, really wonderful. We spent a whole week, almost 2 weeks, while he was there in the Berkeley area. And then he was leaving, and he said to us, he said, because we were saying, what are we going to do? You're leaving. How are we going to, how are we going to survive? He said, I want you to be soul brothers and soul sisters. He says, I want you to be window brothers and window sisters, that you can see into one another and let one another see into you. He says, and if somebody comes and spits on your window, he says, you've got to turn it into a door, open it up, and invite them in. I remember those teachings to this day in ways that things that I learned from him years later didn't enter so deeply into my soul. And he left. I remember calling home to tell my parents, believe it or not, I've actually met somebody Jewish. I said, I've met the most wonderful rabbi, and it's been the most amazing thing. And I was trying to explain to them, and I began crying. I said, I'm really very happy. I don't know why I'm crying. I'll call you back later. And I hung up. And I remember sitting there saying, what's going on? And I realized that all the joy we had found with him, through him, it was as if he had taken it with him. And I realized how deeply, deeply I longed for that and wanted to have it. And I remember sitting there in my little Berkeley apartment saying, I want to have what he has. I want to have access to that. I don't want to be dependent on him or anyone else for it. And I want to learn how to give it to others. And I don't want others to be dependent on me for it. Really, it was a moment of just the direction of my own life, the clarity of what I wanted, that brought to focus so many things of my past and set my direction for the future. I had no idea that what that meant was someday I was going to be a rabbi, that I would be talking about Jewish mysticism. I just knew I had had a very powerful spiritual experience, and I had to pursue it. And I pursued it in all directions, because Rabbi Shlomo was not around. He was on the East Coast. He would come from time to time. And though I'd had this powerful spiritual awakening and experience with him, part of me said, well, it just happened that he was Jewish. But it was a spiritual experience. And I began many years continuing my contact with him, but also exploring in many other paths and practices. I spent a summer with Alan Watts. I spent time with different swamis and Zen masters. I pursued meditation on my own and had some very, very powerful experiences that again confirmed it is possible, it is accessible, there is a whole other reality. And I realized that as much as I was learning and studying, and I had been psych pre-med, and I switched to psych religion, and everything that I was learning, it was wonderful. But what was working for me, time and again, were my experiences.